Hello, everyone. Tonight we have a very exciting guest. His name is Mark. He is one of the co-founders of Avalanche, and it's Launchpad, which is based on the Avalanche ecosystem, providing different services and access to IDOs. Welcome, Mark. How are you?
I am doing great. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, Mark has a very exciting background story that he was one of the OGs on the investor side in crypto. And I think it would be great to hear from you, Mark, your story, how you got involved with crypto, blockchain, and where you are right now.
Yeah, sure. So like a lot of people that I have met that are here in the industry, kind of building, doing things, I got involved with Bitcoin relatively early, around 2012, as an investor and a hobbyist. My background is in technology and marketing, and this is something that came across my radar pretty early, luckily. And so I had been invested in Bitcoin by 2012. In the years that followed, just lightly following the technology. It wasn't, at quite as large as it is now. It was in some circles, but very small niche circles. And so I was kind of living a different life at that point, in marketing mostly, and following along with the industry as it developed. And then in 2016, 2017, when Ethereum came out, and you sort of had this different part of crypto now that was more an application ecosystem and just a different way of conceiving what this could be. That's when I decided to go all in. And as a young guy who was, I guess, entrepreneurial in nature, and I use that term pretty loosely, it was obvious to me at that point that there was a career path through crypto, whereas before it wasn't so obvious to me. You had a lot of good teams coming together, young people doing creative things, and just a really, really exciting energy around creating cool, useful stuff, particularly on Ethereum at the time. So in 2016, 2017, I started working with projects, just generally making myself useful. People wonder how to get into crypto, and crypto is unique in that the industry, despite the amount of money and capital and interest, is still sort of young. And if you have an interest in it, and desire to be involved, there's still this opportunity to hop in a Telegram or hop in a Discord, and start contributing. And if you are able to add value, that's meaningful. And this is exactly what I did in the earliest days: was found projects that I liked, and figure out ways to be involved. And it really can be that easy. So I started doing that in 2016, 2017. Worked on a lot of different projects over the years, until me and my co-founders came across Avalanche. And when I first really got into crypto, the ideals and the concepts of decentralization and what this just offered us as a society were really interesting to me, and the community around it really appealed to me. But the market didn't really reward that necessarily all of the time. It can be irrational, and that's okay. Or it didn't reward it in the way that it felt like it should. But when we got hip to Avalanche, what we saw was a real return to that stuff, the stuff that me and my founders all found really exciting when we first got involved. And what I mean by that is a real step forward in the technology, at the level of the consensus, which is rare. A strong team building this, with good business development acumen, which is I think is required at this point in time. So we decided to kind of go all in on Avalanche at that point, and figure out a way again to contribute and be useful, and drive the thing forward. And that led us to Avalaunch.
Well, that's quite a journey you have over there. I completely agree with you that the ecosystem and the whole decentralization space with blockchain, it's such a young and infant stage right now, and everything out there in the open, not only the code, but also the managing of the different protocols and Discords and Twitter spaces. And anybody can jump in, anybody can contribute, not only with their knowledge, not only with their code, but also with even as easy producible as some of the memes, right?
Yeah.
very trendable, very tacky within this industry. But Avalanche, it's a great place for fundraising, and it is exclusive for Avalanche ecosystem. Tell us, how did Avalanche come about? How did you guys collaborate with Avalanche blockchain or Avalabs team, and the whole journey of creating this launch space within the Avalanche ecosystem, which supports this kind of high throughput, high transaction per second, and finality ecosystem, which I think is going to be the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think our path through this stuff is pretty interesting and pretty unique, certainly relative to other launch pads, because we were lucky enough to see the opportunity pretty early. And so when me and my founders, we were pretty experienced in crypto. This stuff isn't new to us. Working on projects and kind of how the industry moves. It's sort of in our blood at this point, and that's just a function of being in it day in, day out for years and years and years. So you get a real feel for it, and even when it's changing often, you kind of have a better sense of the ways in which it might change, and that allows you to just kind of adapt faster, I think. And so with Avalanche, we saw a really, really young ecosystem full of potential that we had a real opportunity to impact. If we were starting this project a year ago in a really developed ecosystem like Ethereum, I think it would have been more challenging, possible, but more challenging because there's already so much happening. And so, with a young ecosystem like Avalanche at the time, it was amazing to feel like we could step in and in some small way have an effect. And so we knew we wanted to be involved. We knew we wanted to kind of help, and the fundraising option felt sort of obvious at that point, because what it allowed us to do is be involved in many different facets of the ecosystem coming together at a very, very early stage. So when projects are coming together, looking to build community, looking to raise, these are the genesis events that are ultimately most interesting to us. And as a launch pad that helps these projects get off the ground, in more ways than one, that allows us to sort of stand in the middle of all of it, and that's exactly where we want it to be. So at the time, we had reached out to Ava Labs essentially with a pitch, which was, we're going to come to the ecosystem, we're going to help people raise money, we're going to do it regardless, but we'd like your help or at least advice. Because if we have your insight into what's happening, we can be more effective, we can be more useful. And so the original idea was to have Avalaunch be an awareness tool for this thing that we all believed in, very deeply. And we had a pretty big network in crypto across a lot of ecosystems, an ability to market ourselves and build and execute. And on the back of that, we wanted to just go out and talk about Avalanche and get people that didn't know about Avalanche yet, users, builders, thinkers, whatever, just kind of tuned into it. And so we used Avalaunch as a platform for that for a lot of months. And Ava Labs has been great in supporting our efforts. We're not the official launchpad of Avalanche at all. There's other launchpads, and we work with and encourage everyone to do what we do, as long as it's an honest and sincere effort. And so we worked pretty closely with them in the early days, and we have some great strong advisors and friends at this point, from Ava Labs, that work with us as advisors on the project, kind of guiding us when we need help. We're an independent project, and we do sort of what we want when we want, but it's always nice to have that feedback again, so we can make sure that we're doing the best job that we can, and we think that insight is important in that mission. And so as the ecosystem has grown a lot, and the demand on these resources is much, much greater, those relationships are really useful for us.
Absolutely. And not only the ecosystem is growing with brand new applications and existing mega players coming into the space like
Mm-hmm.
SushiSwap, you have Aave porting over their protocol. to the Avalanche because it's EVM compatible. But also the wallets, the number of wallets, I don't know if anybody who's listening right now checked the recent stat, but it's been growing at exponential rate on
Yeah.
Avalanche.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, somebody bridges over to Avalanche, right? And they go to Avalaunch website and they go into the fundraising application. How would one go about participating in the IDO? And what's the process that they have to go through, and how important the KYC within your ecosystem?
Yeah, so there's two ways to go about it. One of them is pretty specific and speaks to our kind of commitment to this network, and the other is more general. So I'll cover the first one really briefly. And one of the ways to participate in our sales is to be running an Avalanche validator node, and these are the nodes that verify transactions on the network and are the key to the decentralization of this technology. And so, if anyone can run a node. You have to hold a certain amount of AVAX, and set it up on your own. But once you're running these nodes and participating in the network, you can earn rewards through the Avalanche blockchain. So we wanted to include these people at the level of the application. So if you're running one of these nodes and you're really invested in the security and the future of this network, you can participate in our sales. So you come to the application, prove that you run this node, and you'll have a guaranteed allocation in our sale. That's one group of people. Now the broader, larger group of people are our stakers, and so you acquire our token, the Zava token, through any number of centralized or decentralized exchanges, and then you come to our application and you stake those tokens in our contract. And what that really just means is that you lock them up in our smart contracts. You can redeem them at any point, but your number of Zava correlates to your allocation size in these sales. So the more Zava you stake, the larger amount you'll be able to acquire when we do an IDO. And we do also require that people KYC, and know your customer for a number of reasons. One, there's certain jurisdictions that are trickier than others. The U.S. being one of them. The regulation here is pretty uncertain, particularly around fundraising, and so we have to kind of be careful about that. The other reason we do that is because the way our sales are structured, it's very important to us that when a project comes to us and they're relying on us to do a fair, equitable, broad distribution of their tokens, which is important in crypto. That we don't have multiple accounts and multiple people coming and claiming these allocations. We want to do the best we can to ensure that one person gets one share and that everyone has what is essentially an equal opportunity to participate. So as long as you're willing to KYC there and hold some amount of the token, and there are no minimums on our platform at this point. That's, I think, one of the things that makes us a little different. Other launchpads will require you to hold substantial amounts of their tokens for an allocation or a chance at an allocation. So if you have $10 worth of Zava, you can come and participate in our sales, and you'll get something. It won't be a lot because you're only staking $10, but it's important for those people to feel included and have a chance to participate. And this goes, pretty in line with, I think, our philosophy and ethos about inclusion. And we go a long way. We go out of our way a long way to try and include everyone.
I'm actually looking at your launch app right now, and it seems like over the existence of your Launchpad across 4 different applications, you guys raised approximately 1.6 million in IDOs.
Yeah.
That's quite exciting. And I see some of the names like Yay Games, Kalau, Hurricane Swap, and the latest being Roco Finance.
Yep.
That's really exciting. So how do you estimate the impact of launchpads on the ecosystems? Do they allow brand new applications and brand new ideas enter the ecosystem more freely through the decentralized offering? What do you think?
Yeah, I think launch pads, sort of done right, are very, very impactful, and it's a unique opportunity for a community and a team to come together and kind of get started on the right foot. The history of fundraising in crypto is kind of a little tainted. Historically, there's always good stories and bad stories. With the 2007 ICO boom, you saw a lot of good projects that are still around today, but then a lot of bad ones that kind of took advantage of the opportunity. And token sales and IEOs, these are initial exchange offerings. These came into the fore in 2000, I don't know, 19 or so, never really took root. And then with the Launchpad, it's a different kind of fundraising, in that I believe, at least the way that we try and run these sales in the community, is it aligns the retail investor more closely with the team, and the retail investor, quite frankly, represents the user. So a lot of times the way that these deals are structured is there will be a private round, or a seed round, or a private round, or something like that, and then there'll be some kind of public offering. And when we got into the industry, one of the things that we noticed about the way these launchpad sales were being done and run is there was large amounts of money going privately, and to early investors, and only a very small portion available for the users, right? The retail person, the public, the guys and girls that were actually going to be in the community and be involved. And that was something that we really wanted to try and remedy. There's nothing wrong with raising money privately. It's a necessary function. But one of the things that we wanted to see was there be some equality or parity across the sale sizes and the pricing of these things. What we didn't want to see was a private sale person receive some sort of outsized opportunity with relation to amount and price relative to a public person. There's just no need for it, not to the degree that we were seeing. So when we run sales, and this is how we've kind of managed to raise so much money across only a handful of sales, is that we work with teams and push them, which the good teams are happy to be pushed in this way, to do larger and larger public rounds, rework the tokenomics in a way that can kind of support that. So we still have, less volatility and good price action after the sale. But the end result is that the community is more included. So really what's happening is there's less going to private investors and more going to the users. And this is, always been our commitment to the community, because what people don't realize about launchpads is we are essentially brokering deals on behalf of the public. We're working with teams to make sure that our community is well represented inside of these sales, and they're just a part of the deal like anyone else. And we want to bring this opportunity to retail, and again, the users, the people that are actually part of the community and platform. And that's a big part of what we're about, and why our sale sizes are so large. They're $500,000, $600,000, when some other launch pads will do $75,000 or $100,000. So these aren't so much marketing events. This is a real effort to get these tokens distributed to the people that sort of deserve them in a fair fashion.
Wow. And the fair fashion that you kind of described previously, you guys are allocating those access tokens basically to validators or somebody who has access to Xava and staking within your platform, right? So you have two different avenues of sourcing those kind of participants into the marketplace. So let's say, for example, somebody who's just getting into the crypto and they see that there is this brand new avenue that possibilities opened up to them, which is an IDO. In your words, from your experience, somebody who, let's say, a very inexperienced within a DeFi, what is an IDO?
So an IDO, at this point in time, it's actually a bit of a misnomer. So an IDO stands for initial DEX offering. And just to give a little bit of like fundraising history, the DEX offering was something that came about I couldn't tell you exactly when, but at some point within the last 2 years, probably about then. And it was essentially a liquidity pool that was opened on a decentralized exchange where the team would put tokens into the pool and users could come and swap their, stablecoin or ETH or AVAX for these tokens. But over time, the mechanism in which these tokens were distributed evolved. And so at this point, we have our own dedicated platform which sells these tokens. The way that the sale is structured is unique to us, but the industry as a whole still refers to these things as IDOs, even though they no longer work in the way that an IDO once did. So, long story short, an IDO is just a public offering where a team that is in need of funds, operating capital, taps a community of people who are interested in investing in their project to help them raise money.
Are there any regulatory or fundraising hurdles that you guys as a Launchpad have to go through? I know you mentioned KYC. I know you mentioned the regulatory space and fundraising in the US is quite tricky to navigate.
Yeah.
Something that, for example, usual VCs or investors have to go through, which becoming an accredited investor in order to get involved with this early seed round and early type of startup investing. Do you guys have to do a lot of research and kind of protect the users on your end, or do they also have to be an accredited investor from the US, at least from the US side, to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, this is something we pay very close attention to. Again, because the regulatory landscape's pretty onerous at this point, and it's one of the reasons that at this point, accredited or not, the U.S. investors are not allowed to participate on the platform. And there's other jurisdictions around the globe that, for one reason or another, aren't allowed to participate either. Now, offering these sales to U.S. accredited investors is something that we'd like to do and something that we're investigating. But for a young platform that is just ultimately interested in helping good projects, it was not a priority in the beginning. It's more of a priority now. So the way that the entities are structured, they're not U.S. based companies or anything like that. So with the help of strong legal guidance, I think we've had to navigate this in a way that makes the most sense for like the current landscape, which is changing often and drastically. So it's something that is, as a fundraising platform, we're very cognizant of, and even large companies like Coinbase, here in the U.S., who one of the most well-known, well-respected kind of organizations here in the U.S. Even a entity of this size, scope, and power really struggles with the regulation that happens here in the U.S. and what the right thing to do is, and getting proper guidance from the SEC. They're a good example of a company that wants to be doing the right thing and spends a lot of money trying to do the right thing, but still struggles to figure out what that thing is. And they're much, much larger than us. So at this point in time, the best option for us with respect to certain places in the world is just to kind of skip it for now. And it's an unfortunate reality of crypto, but it's just a reflection of, I think, where the industry is and how far we have to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of a very tricky environment here in the US.
Yeah.
Within the regulatory of the approvals and certain different kind of environments and assets, because there's different regulations, regulatory bodies like SEC or CFTC that always would like to fight for a piece of pie to regulate certain different assets. And there's always going to be that battle between them, while kind of it feels like sometimes neglecting the end user and
Right.
forgetting that kind of inclusivity beats the division aspect of any part of the financial inclusion. Since we're talking about different environments and regulations, what are your kind of preferred places in the whole world? Some of the regulatory places, like countries or jurisdictions that are more crypto friendly. I know, for example, Portugal is one of them. Avalanche and Avalabs are actually having a blockchain event there in Lisbon.
Yeah.
Exciting place. Been there once. Super warm weather right now. I'm sure the guys are enjoying it. But what's what's the regulatory environment in the whole world is like? Where do you guys see the most amount of friendliness towards crypto?
Yeah, I mean, it depends sort of on what like what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to invest, the answer would be different than if you're trying to, start your own project. And so there are kind of solutions, I would say, that a lot of crypto founders rely on to operate in a way that feels safe. So there are, places like, Switzerland, the British Virgin Islands, the Marshall Islands, who currently has their own. This is one of the first, smaller nations, right, to adopt their own digital dollar. Little more forward thinking in this way. And then there are European countries that aren't necessarily so far forward in the regulation, but it's more embedded in the culture actually. So you take a place like Turkey, where in Emin Günsir, the founder of Avalanche, he's actually he's Turkish, and so the Turkish community has a large visible presence within Avalanche, and this is a something that we've kind of come to find over time, and we have a large Turkish community ourselves. And in Turkey, it's very different than here in the U.S., where the headlines are in the U.S. are about price and regulation, and the clickbait about Bitcoin being banned, whereas in Turkey, the culture and media is such where they talk about interesting crypto projects on the news, and they have founders as part of like the popular culture there. And so it's just interesting to kind of see outside of regulation how different cultures are adopting crypto. We work with a lot of Vietnamese investors and media organizations, and same thing there. In these countries where maybe there isn't so much wealth and access, crypto finds its way into the zeitgeist, I guess, in a way that we just don't see here in the US. In the US, people are investors and they're into the culture of NFTs and art and music. But in other countries, the things that we take for granted, like access like to banking accounts and sound money and ways to exchange this money in smaller countries or less developed countries, not certainly not third world countries necessarily. It gets adopted into the everyday life in a way that is really really great to see, because it affords people lots of opportunity and ways to make money that they would never have otherwise. I know lots of people working in crypto, getting into crypto just in the ways that I did when I was new, helping out, using their skills, making 10 times the yearly salary in their country, maybe every month. And to us, it's normal. But this is really kind of life changing money relative to their peers. And I think it's just such an amazing opportunity to kind of change level the playing field a little bit and kind of change the game. And it goes back to that thing that we were talking about earlier, where it just takes a curiosity and a passion and a hunger to do something different and be involved. And if you have that, like, there's opportunity in crypto. And I think that's something that gets missed often, is people focus largely on the investment aspect of it, and it makes sense that they would do that. But just from a work career professional perspective, there's so much opportunity to just kind of change your life and get involved in the smallest ways. And if you're in crypto long enough, you see it all the time. But it definitely isn't part of I would say, the popular conversation around cryptocurrencies and price action and Bitcoin being banned. It's we work with lots of people from all over the world. Our staff is all everywhere. The founders are U.S. based, but almost no one else is. And it's just it's great to have this coordinated effort across the globe that just, I don't know, feels like it does good. And that's a pretty personally gratifying feeling, just something, even being peripherally involved in something like that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of change in narrative if you look at different regions. Like for example, in the US, like you mentioned, there's a lot of this kind of FOMO or FUD relatively to the price or the fundamentals of certain different assets. Whereas in different regions, you talk about more of the fundamental kind of values of different projects or access or financial ability to essentially position yourself without providing any financial risk to control your wealth to different third parties, right? It's a very
Right.
refreshing narrative overseas, and it's kind of very healthy to see that. But coming back to the Avalanche, your baby with your co-founders, you guys kind of groomed it.
Mhm.
You chose Avalanche, which has the transaction finality under 1 second across all three chains. I think it's about 0.83 at this point, and anybody can verify it at any given point in time on Avascan. But I'm sure
Mhm.
there's a lot of demand to build on this ecosystem, right? Something
Yeah, for sure.
that Jay from Evalabs we talked about is there could be different applications deployed based on this high throughput and low fee structure of the consensus model that allows certain different applications
Hmm.
like Sabier, for example, to come in and stream your paycheck in real time. And that could revolutionarily change somebody's spending habits
Yeah.
or even managing their own wealth and funds. What are you guys looking in applications or development teams when somebody's applying for an initial DEX offering on Avalanche?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, we have a bit of a unique perspective on this because, our process sort of self selects in a way. We're very, very particular. And I can go into why that is. And it's probably largely obvious. But, when I first got into this, I thought a lot about, what the ecosystem needs and, the kinds of things that Avalaunch should do, and what applications and types of projects are going to best serve the ecosystem. And what I learned over time was that it doesn't really matter what I think, because if those things aren't being built and they're not being built by the kinds of people that I want to represent, it doesn't really matter anyway. And so what I mean by that is, when we're talking to teams, we put teams through the ringer. Really, when we do a sale, it's a really large responsibility on our part because we have a large community of people that are trusting us, to essentially, give them good stuff, really. And so when we end up doing a sale, this isn't something that we met the team 2 weeks before and it looked pretty good. These are the end result of very, very long, deep working relationships. And we prefer to get stuff early, because in the earliest stages of the project, it's easier to provide feedback that will be taken, and is possible. If we meet a team and they're ready for some kind of IDO next week, the variables are said and done, and oftentimes it's not going to fit with our model. So what we look for are teams that, and this is just our approach. There's a lot of ways to do it, but this has worked largely for us so far. As we're looking for teams that are in no rush, that are willing and able to take feedback, and understand our community, and their wants and their desires, because they make that known, that's for sure. And that's kind of our commitment to our people. And so when you look at Avalaunch, it is useful not to think about it as a general purpose platform for anyone. It really is a representation of the people involved, and that's just how we have chosen to run it in the way that we think is the most important. And so, we work really, really long term before and after with projects, because our value here is, I think, is our understanding and connection to this ecosystem in particular. And so we were really drawn here because it was made up of human beings. we're very familiar with other chains and other ecosystems, and me personally, for whatever reason, I just never found that there. And since I'm a founder too, and I'm running a project, and I'm in the community day to day, I have to have the human connection that we've been talking about this whole time, or else it's too hard. It's too much work, it's too many hours, it's too much commitment to not have that human personal connection. And so when we're looking at sales, or potential project, and there is a lot of demand, one of the ways that we guarantee or ensure that we do the best stuff by our community that we can is just putting in the hours to understand the team, to work with them, to make sure they know sort of what our expectations are, and also inform certain things about the project. And that can be, we do a lot of advising, consulting, whatever you want to call it. Not because we want to or have to. It's just because we need to know that this thing is right. Because when we have a large community at this point, when we turn to those people and say, here's the next Avalaunch IDO, and we think this is worth you guys taking a look at, and we really take that as a huge responsibility. And so this is our personal approach, but we're people, and the team is made up of people and personalities. And I think that often gets just missed. It's easy to think this thing is just a token sale machine, that you put projects through and you swap tokens. I guess there are things that exist that are like that. But one of the reasons that I think we've been able to do well and are popular, and I think somewhat respected, is that we take this approach, and at the end of the day, it's all driven by our commitment to the community and the people involved in it.
And just touching upon the size of the community that you guys have, just looking at your staking page, we can say that there's about 7.1 million Xava staked, and that's about $22.8 million. So you have a big community, you have a lot of capital essentially staked within your ecosystem. And that's only one side of the users that have access to the IDOs that you guys are launching on the platform. The other side that we've talked about previously are going to be the node providers for the ecosystem, the validators. So that's very exciting. And you guys are looking out for your investors. You're doing a lot of deep research into the teams and just making sure that the project that you're launching are essentially going to be exciting, but also adding value to the ecosystems and the users.
Yeah.
Something interesting that we've talked about, right? Like the IDO, the initial DEX offering, right? Even though the kind of definition of that term has been changed throughout the different iterations of the evolution of DeFi, you guys launched Yay Games, right? Like that's not a DEX. I think that's a different application, right? Like, is it an on-chain game?
Yeah, so Yay Games, it's pretty interesting. So they launched with some games, I think to satiate the appetite of the token holders and the everyday user, which is appropriate. But at the heart of Yay Games is a game development ecosystem and community and platform for other developers, and that's kind of what's next for them, and the reason that we were so interested in what they were doing. And so, yeah, they have some games, and they're fun to play. But what I think what they're doing is kind of like a distribution platform, but also a rallying point for other game developers, because blockchain gaming is tremendous at this point. Play to earn, NFT games, idle games. This is really taken root, and so strong platforms with resources and tools for developers to continue to build those games in a way that's cohesive and feels a part of something is pretty cool. So in the traditional gaming PC world, you might have something like the Steam platform, which is a place you can go and is a publisher, right? And you can go and download games and Steam games, or it's great to be listed there and have your game there. It's a great source of visibility and like a milestone for a game developer, let's say. And Yay Games is I think something that's equivalent, at least in concept, but for blockchain games. And so the reason something like this is important is because this part of crypto, the gaming side of it is developing, and it's developing fast, and it's becoming really, really exciting and novel very quickly. And so, when we're talking about the kinds of things that Avalaunch is interested in, it is the platforms that are going to have a broad reach, and a large effect, and are run by good people, that, again, like us, kind of want to help and want to contribute. So it's and I keep coming back to this because it's just such an important part of this whole thing. The ideas are great and the impact is big, but unlike traditional tech, it's made up of these people to people relationships. At least the projects that we think are good, unlike a Silicon Valley startup. You have these large projects that have raised tens of millions of dollars. They transact billions of dollars in value, and you can go into the Telegram room and talk to the team and the founder, and that's an opportunity, and it's also a responsibility, and it's also a stress, right? It's just a different kind of industry, but that human component of it just becomes so important for that reason. And it's great for the investor, it's great for the user, it's great for the team, but it really is just an entirely new type of structure, in which this stuff is being built and operated on.
Absolutely. I think the development of the decentralized marketplaces, specifically in gaming, and I think gaming right now has covered more market share in the traditional world than music, and I think it was music, streaming, and art all combined, and it's growing at a rapid pace. I think that's mostly contributed to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
kids for the last 2 years staying at home, right? And there's a lot of credit
Yeah.
cards available to them that gives them access to all these different platforms and games. But literally just a couple of days ago, we've received the news from Steam that they're going to be shutting down and blocking all the blockchain games on their platform. While at the same time, you have
Mm-hmm.
Epic Games that came out with a completely opposite statement a couple hours later, saying that they're going to be welcoming all of those blockchain games. And
Oh well.
that's, I think there's going to be a really hefty battle between different major players, and seeing these decentralized platforms like EA Games and so many others that are building this permissionless access to gaming experiences and play to earn metaverses is something that, again, we have never seen before. And it just opens up a lot of different avenues for growth, not only within Avalanche blockchain ecosystem, but just the multi-chainverse. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what do you think overall Avalanche right now? It's still very, very young. The ecosystem, the user
Yeah.
base, the whole movement, even the Rush is its infant stage. There hasn't been even deployment of a lot of different rewards and capital from the
Right.
current and from the last announcement, which is 10 million Alex tokens. What do you feel like something that
Mm-hmm.
Avalanche is missing and something that you would love to see coming into the Avalanche? Maybe it's a brand new concept, maybe it's an existing one, maybe it's something that you guys are currently working on.
Yeah, in today's crypto market, a lot of what drives this stuff, and again, this is just my personal perspective, is the DeFi ecosystem, and this is where a lot of the people that are in crypto day to day, which ultimately drive the market, and the whole momentum and energy around the industry live. And so, one of the things that was interesting that you saw around the early Avalanche ecosystem, again, this is just a function of it being young, were people experimenting with existing protocols, that came largely from Ethereum. The really creative, builder energy that existed on Ethereum, which made Ethereum really special. And I see that same kind of fertile soil here on Avalanche. And so, what we're paying close attention to are, you take protocols like Uniswap and then Sushi and or Curve and Aave and Compound, and these things that are just tweaked and leveraged, in every which way. These are all things that were born out of Ethereum. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to, and I'm starting to see now, are these original protocols, are these original ideas that are going to, sort of write their own story, born and bred on Avalanche. And now that the technology and the ecosystem has been validated, just broadly in the ways that we knew it would. We weren't sure when. I suspected it would be sooner rather than later, but I think that's happened now. I'm really anticipating, a kind of new generation of builders to come and start, laying those foundational work here on Avalanche first. And I just think that lineage of building and creativity is important for any ecosystem, and we are starting to see that now. There's a project called Platypus that we know and have worked with some that I think is starting to represent that. And again, this just comes with time. There's nothing wrong with forks. When you take someone else's code and do something different with it. This is a big part of what we do in crypto. But I'm excited for Avalanche to kind of have a new chapter and really start to build out, like what the ecosystem is going to look like in, a year or two. And again, I see that really starting now.
I think kind of picking up where you left off in terms of the ecosystem and different avenues that excite you. There's a one project, or at least one avenue, that I think would be fitting in that I haven't seen yet being developed on Avalanche, and that's the distribution and participation in revenue from music streaming.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have such a high throughput, right? It's under a second. Let's say it's going to be a second, right?
Yeah.
And you can essentially distribute. You can, let's say, for example, you can issue an asset, an NFT, for example, that would
Yep.
represent a certain percentage of ownership of that specific song or album or an EP, for example. And for each and every stream, or for each and every block, you have a streaming royalty distribution between those who've participated in initial, let's say, song offering.
Right.
So I think that would be great beneficial within Avalanche ecosystem, because if you would develop something like this on Ethereum that just defeats itself, that would just eat you alive.
We have the privilege of working with teams very early, or at least seeing ideas come together early, and we talk with a lot of people in the music industry who are turned on to Avalanche now because what they've always wanted to do is now possible because of the transactions speed and cost. And so we're seeing a lot of platforms that are about giving power back to the artists and the creatives, and through the royalties that you're talking about, but also through experiences and interacting more directly with their fan base. And so you'll see things like the royalty distribution, sure. Also, NFTs that can represent access to events or interactions, and you can there's an endless list of ways to kind of spin the way that you engage with these things, and then furthermore with your fans and communities. And so it's an exciting time, not just for the world, right, in the financial system, but also for empowering, musicians, creatives. The idea, the sort of nucleus of crypto has always been removing the middleman, the value extractors. And so this absolutely applies to the music industry, which I admittedly don't know much about. But in any large industry, it can be predatory at times. And so taking that middleman out, and allowing a more organic connection between the fans and the community and the creators is amazing. And we're definitely going to see some very cool things being built on Avalanche around those concepts very soon.
That's awesome. And I'm sure Avalanche, the platform that you've created, will help and foster the ecosystem through connecting the users of the ecosystem and knowing what they want, and being able to participate in the initial offerings through your platform.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys working on any exciting projects right now that you can talk about? Or are we going to blip it out of the podcast?
uh, well, the one I just talked about would probably be in that category. I can't say too much about it, but it's a project that we are, I guess you could say, incubating or advising with some very well-known people in the music industry, in conjunction with people at Ava Labs, and just trying to bring a great community-driven, artistic experience to the platform. And it's a little ways out, but these things that good things take time, right? And so that's how I would answer that question.
It's very interesting the way that I kind of framed this whole conversation. Previously, I talked about the music industry, and you guys are actually working on the product within the music industry. That's
Yeah, yeah,
great minds think alike.
that's right.
But I think we're coming to the end of our conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. I'm sure everybody who's listened to your conversation and the way that you explain things, it's very easy for somebody new who's just joining or who's been in the ecosystem to understand what you guys are doing and how much value you guys are bringing into the developing of the new projects and providing this inclusivity for people to participate in the initial offerings.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, I'll leave the floor to you. Tell us where the listeners can find more about you, more about the Avalanche platform, and what you guys have in store.
Sure. It's pretty easy. You can just check out our website. That's avalaunch.app. So avalaunch.app. And from there you can find our Telegram community. It's a big community. We'd love to have anyone that's interested. Check out our Twitter, our Medium. It goes a lot into the kinds of projects that we run and why we run them. Who we are and how the platform works. And it's the best way to kind of get involved. And we encourage anyone to check us out, see if what we do is interesting to you, and if so, join us. The more the merrier.
I would highly recommend everybody who is listening to this go ahead and jump into the Avalanche Telegram and participate and see what people are talking about. There's a great amount of alpha if you're trader based to see kind of trends within the industry and what people are talking about and what exciting new projects are coming and breaking out. But also, if you're brand new to the ecosystem, you can learn a lot from other different people and peers
Mm-hmm.
within the industry. Don't hesitate to contribute. Any idea is a great idea. It's a developing space. Everybody doesn't know everything about this space, and that's what makes it great.
Yeah, that's right. It can feel intimidating at times, but once you get in it, you really do see it's for everyone, and that's kind of the point. So I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for jumping on a call with us and having this amazing podcast. We wish you all the best with Avalanche and the project that you're working with.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. It means a lot to come on here and talk about what we do. So thank you.
Thank you everyone who just joined for another great episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and consider subscribing on your platform of choice. But until then, let's see you guys in the next one.